Hello, my name is Diana Archambeau. I would like to thank you for viewing my presentation today. My report started out to prove that unorthodox candidates in the presidential elections add interest from the voters. It quickly switched gears to try to explain why voter turnout is extremely low in America. This presentation will include a complete review of the entire presidential election process, including a history of how the process was developed. It will also include a study examining voter turnout. I have included a few examples of off-the-wall candidates that are unusual to say the least. We will then see if there is a connection between unusual candidates and voter turnout. I will discuss this year's frontrunners and give you the public's opinion of them. Then I will address how Americans feel about the presidential election process. Okay, let's get started, shall we? Being involved in the presidential election process is like spending a day at the horse races. It's a long, drawn-out process that lasts well over a year. Much like the horse races, there are preliminaries that lead up to the big event. The presidential election that is held the second Tuesday in November every 4 years. In the beginning of this process, candidates announce that they will be running for president. Then they campaign, then there are debates where they address issues and become aggressive toward each other. Then over the course of several months, all of the states hold individual elections called primaries. These primaries are held to earn delegate votes for the corresponding state. At the end of the primaries, whoever earns the most delegate votes then earns their party's nomination to run for President of the United States on the main stage in November. During that election, the main objective is to earn the most electoral votes and win the presidency. Electoral votes are awarded on a state-to-state basis as the election unfolds. A little bit about how this process was developed. In the beginning of our country, there were approximately 4 million citizens living in America. Everyone was pretty much along the eastern seaboard in 1,000-mile stretch. It was impossible for candidates to campaign as transportation and communication between the states was slow and virtually non-existent. So our founding fathers developed the Electoral College to represent the people of each state in the presidential election. So that's how the Electoral College was developed. This year's election includes some unorthodox candidates which seem to be adding public interest to the contest. So I wanted to research some unusual presidential candidates. Throughout the history of the presidential races, here are a few examples of the candidates I chose to highlight for my paper. First being in 1980 when Joe Walsh officially announced his bid to run for the White House. His big campaign promise was free gas for every American. He also stated that he was going to change the national anthem from the Star-Spangled Banner to his hit song, Life's Been Good. Most people considered his candidacy to be a joke and paid little to no attention to him. The other two candidates that were featured in my report were no joke and had considerable political agendas. The first being Gabriel Green. Green was a confirmed UFOologist. He stated he actually was in touch with his aliens from other worlds. His promise to the American people was to be a space-age president during the times of early space travel. He ran twice. First in 1960, where he withdrew. He vowed to get reorganized and come back again. He did so 12 years later in 1972. He finished the campaign but had a very low vote count. The next candidate that I featured was William Foster. He ran for president on 3 occasions: 1924, 1928, and 1932. He was a member of the American Communist Party. His promise to the American people was to get rid of our capitalistic way of life and replace it with a simpler, better way of life: communism. This wasn't the communists' only bid at the White House, as they had other candidates try and fail. Their last bid for office was in 1984. After that year, they have not thrown their hat in the presidential political ring. The voter turnout was also researched for this paper, as I hope to find a direct connection between unusual candidates and higher than normal voter turnout. I did not. The concrete numbers I found were between the mid-20th century until present time, giving us 60 or so years of data. The most amazing statistic I found when uncovering this information was that the numbers were fairly consistent. They were consistent and not in a good way. They were consistently low, almost to the point of being embarrassing for our nation. This is where the paper began taking a turn, as I wanted to uncover why the numbers were low and are there any solutions to increase voter turnout and raising them to respectability. This year's current Republican and Democratic frontrunners can both be considered as non-traditional presidential politicians. One is a businessman who never ran for any public office before in his life. The other is a female who has had more success than any other female before her that ran for office of President of the United States. Overall public opinion of both of these candidates is not very high. In fact, they are both below 50% overall, and they are both below 50% within their respective parties as well. One of the big knocks the public has against them both is that they are both uncompassionate. In one recent poll that was conducted, 1 out of every 4 eligible voters said that if the presidential election does come down to these two candidates, that they would stay at home and not vote. Could this be a reason as to why voter turnout is historically low? Because voters don't have a favorable opinion of the candidates who have ran for office. Trump and Clinton do have 2 things in common. The first being that the majority of our nation does not care for them, and the second being that they pretty much have nothing in common. Trump prefers the straightforward, no-nonsense approach in dealing with the issues. In fact, when he talks about dealing with evil, his comment is they have to be dealt with in the only language they know, which can be interpreted as fight fire with fire or an eye for an eye, where Hillary Clinton wants to take the diplomatic approach and talk our way through problems and issues. The research I conducted for my paper leads me to the following conclusions as to why voter turnout is continuously low for presidential elections. The first reason as to why the turnout is low is because Americans do not understand how the process works. What is the reasoning for using delegates for the primaries? How are the electors picked on a state-by-state basis? The second reason is many Americans would like to see the current process changed. Most would like to see all the primary elections being held on one specific day instead of spread out over a long period of time. Their argument here is that once a candidate gets on a roll, the media plays it up and it is hard to gain momentum and overtake that candidate if you are trailing them. Especially after Super Tuesday, many people feel the primaries are pretty much over after Super Tuesday. So why even take the time to vote if the candidate who is leading after Super Tuesday is almost guaranteed their party's nomination? Another aspect of the election Americans would like to see changed is the elimination of the Electoral College. Most agree it was necessary centuries ago, but now it is outdated and needs to go. The public would like to see the office of the President of the United States be decided by the popular vote. There is definitely a solid reason to look into this change because on 4 occasions, the candidate that won the popular vote actually lost the election. The last time this happened was in 2000 when George W. Bush defeated Al Gore for president. Gore actually had over 500,000 more votes than Bush, thus winning by the popular vote. However, Bush won the election as he had 5 more electoral votes Gore had. The last reason that could create low voter turnout is not having a candidate they believe in or that they like. This could hold true with the upcoming election in November, as the poll indicated that 1 in 4 voters will not go to the polls if the contest is Clinton versus Trump. So how do we increase voter turnout and have more Americans take ownership in the leadership of our country? Maybe we should begin by making changes to the current format and hold the primaries all on the same day and do away with the Electoral College and use the popular vote to choose our nation's leader, and perhaps this would excite the American public to take part in a civic duty that is part of our freedom that so many have sacrificed so much for throughout the years. Again, thank you for watching my video and have a wonderful day, and remember, don't forget to vote.